everyone. So I need to be very quick, right? So now you learned a lot about DDD today already, I guess. I'm here to give you some other ideas and hints and tips how to do it from another angle. So how I do it or how I see it from the product's perspective. I'm a product manager, and I'm also a DDD enthusiast. And yeah, I also like Nutella, but anyways. So let me just show you how this combination works out, right? By the way, how many of you are product managers, owners, business analysts? Oh, wow. Much more than I expected. That's great. So you probably learned about like DDD, obviously. So approach to design complex systems. So if you ask me, it's rather about ubiquitous language and minimizing those mappings in our heads. Like referring back to Paul Reiner's talk, if you remember that conversation between Pam and Josh about retail prices and everything. So they used ubiquitous language to discuss that. So that's a very important thing in domain-driven design, if not the most important thing. And also, based on that, DDD deals with complex problems on a daily basis, right? And so does product management. This is not new. So we are dealing with complex problems on a daily basis. And we're really welcoming techniques that helps us doing that and solving those complex problems. But what is product management? So there are a lot of definitions out there. I don't really want to bore you with those, but I really can relate to Martin Ericsson's definitions, let's say. Like it's an intersection of UX, business, and technology. It pretty much means that it's middle of everything. So we are in the middle of everything, and it means that sometimes we are the ones who see the pain in the dev teams first, or we are the ones who need to improve the team health. Because product managers are not just building up products or trying to build up great products, but we need to build up healthy teams as well. Or if not build up, but we like to work with healthy teams, obviously, and we need to improve the team health. We also pick up software project management methodologies. We are deep diving in Jira. We are also the ones who need to know the priorities, the business strategy, the business model. So that's a lot. So if you ask me, that's why I mentioned that we really welcoming techniques that helps us doing that. Yeah, who else would need DDD more than a product person then, based on what I mentioned so far? But what does it mean? So what does it mean when I say that we do DDD or product person involved in DDD? Or what does it mean on the other side, like product people can help dev teams to do DDD or apply DDD? What does this mean? First of all, I would say for product people to be the domain experts on those common knowledge sharing sessions, on those domain modeling sessions, or even facilitate those sessions, or initiate to have those sessions. It's really, really useful. It's essential and super important for product people to help in developing the shared understanding and help making decisions for the dev teams, or at least, participate or making those decisions as well, together with the dev teams. Recently, we needed to replace a complete payment management system, and we hired a completely new development team for that, which meant 5 developers. There was also a technical architect guy. He was associated to the project internally. And yeah, they were struggling what's the best way to learn for these new people to learn about the domain. And also they had no backlog at that time because the complete team was new and the project was new. So they were discussing and struggling about how to start, how to kick off. And I overheard them speaking about that, and I was recommending EVENTSTORMING. So I offered them to facilitate EVENTSTORMING session and introduce them to EVENTSTORMING. And we did that. So I set up the scheme like the technical architect guy who was more or less aware with the domain already. He was telling us about that. And the guys, the developer guys, were capturing the events, the actors, the systems they heard out from the story, from the technical architect guy's story. And then we merged the events into the timeline on the wall. And they told the domain story. Each of the developer guys told the domain story aloud. And basically, then they got familiar with the domain. That's great, but they still didn't have backlog at that time. So I didn't know what to start with, how to kick off the whole thing. So I decided to build user story mapping on the top of the event storming model, let's say. So we identified user stories on the top of the event storming model. We broke the user stories down into tasks. We prioritized the tasks underneath the stories. And then we could see we identified the minimum viable product that needs to be delivered first, and we identified a couple of later releases. So this way, we could build up the backlog, at least an initial version of the backlog. They also learned about the domain story, which is also great. So I felt it as like a success, it was very successful for them to learn about the domain. Or another example, this is not the same example, this is from one of my meetups, but this is the same technique, like having an event storming model, and then we identified the user stories on the top of the model, and then we broke it down into tasks, we prioritized the tasks, so from top to down, and we draw up the releases there. So I just wanted to give you an idea how it looked like, but this is not the same. Or another example, which is very similar, because we needed to hire a completely new development team, but for a completely new domain area at the company. But the difference was that we had no domain experts at all. But one of the guys from the developers heard me speaking about event storming in a podcast, and he approached me like whether I can facilitate them on event storming. I was a little bit concerned because, yeah, no domain expert there. I knew nothing about that domain, and they knew nothing either. So, yeah, but let's try. So that was the case where I really needed to use my, let's say, product management or rather business analysis skills. So I needed to ask the right question. And with asking the right questions, I needed to facilitate out the domain, the unknown domain that time, from the team, which actually succeeded. So we had a domain story at the end. Obviously, it was full with questions. It was full with assumptions. But that's a huge result, I think. So the dev team already had their questions, their assumptions. They can take later on, obviously, when they had a domain expert already, they could take those and start with that. So that was also something that worked out very well. So why product people should love event storming, based on what I so far mentioned? Because it's about visualization. And we, I think, instinctively love like things that are visual. We love to do visualization. Can be combined with great techniques. I combined it with user story mapping, but you can use other techniques as well. Like Kenny mentioned the example mapping, which is his favorite. Alberto, who is the creator of event storming, he said that event storming is his pizza, and you can build any toppings or add any toppings on it. This is really true. So what you like, build on the top and use how it's useful. Yeah, it shows us what's important, where to focus, how to improve, and for product people especially, it's very, very useful to brainstorm it out together with the teams and see where to improve their products. Because we shouldn't forget that actually the second best source of product ideas is dev team. I mean brainstorming with dev teams. So that's really, this is something that we don't want to lose as an opportunity. Yeah, it maps out the big picture and also develops a shared understanding. Who wouldn't love that as a product person, right? And help teams to design a great architecture, which is very important, I think. So as product people can feel, I really can enjoy that great feeling when my work influences the architecture, or at least I have insight in the decisions. At least I have insight how the dev teams or how the architects come up with new things or come up with the design, with the architecture. So it's a really important thing. Yeah, it is not dictating. It is not about dictating the requirements anymore. It is not about asking, like dev teams asking, what is the next to deliver, what is the next requirement, and referring back to Paul Reiner's talk today morning. So it's not about feature factory anymore, like product telling us what to deliver, what is the next feature we need to deliver. No, it's common brainstorming. It's brainstorming together with the teams in these collaborative and flexible workshops, like event storming, for instance. So product people should really really like organize these things if that's not organized by someone else at the company, and we can really use these to have a place for that, for common brainstorming and for common brainstorming about product direction and improvements. Again, this is just repeating myself, but product people be the domain expert, or just learn if you don't know the domain, for instance. Help by applying your product skills, as I mentioned, so you also can help only by asking the right questions because you are very good at it. And if there are not, there are no sessions like this, like for instance, EVENTSTORMING so far at your company, let's organize the first one and be the leading by example, right? The second thing here I wanted to mention is, well, we always, and correct me if I'm wrong, product people, but we always get the question, like, what is the most important thing? What's the priority? What's the business model? What's the business strategy? Those are really fair questions, obviously. I would ask the same, but it's very difficult to answer. However, it looks like product people should know all these things, and everyone expects us to, just answer this. But it's very hard to answer in the right way. So we also need to learn a lot about customers, about the business model, and the strategy before we can at least answer these questions. And I just wanted to show you some techniques I'm using to learn about these things I mentioned. For instance, business model canvas, which is a great technique for visualizing your business model. Those 9 boxes basically describe any companies from largest to smallest all over the world. So you just need to look at your company as a system and identifying its components. And it can really help to map out the business model and the business strategy. The other I also draw out here is the Lean Startup Canvas, which is very similar, but you might want to use that if you want to solve problems from scratch. So it's a startup way of thinking. And by the way, if you have time, come to my session on Friday, because we are going to work with business model canvas, if you are free and feel like. The other thing, a very, very good technique, the value proposition canvas, to learn about your customers. So what you do here is you map out, so basically based on business model canvas, you identify the customer segments you have at your company or amongst your customers. And now you might want to map out these customer segments' pains and gains and jobs they do on a daily basis. And you also make it visual what you can offer for them at the moment. And you are comparing those two, and basically you are analyzing the gaps. So if there are gaps between what you are offering and between the customer's needs, then you can immediately know where to improve, right? So this is also a great technique for using in order to answer those priority-related and customer-related questions or business model-related questions. The third thing I wanted to mention here is, well, it's product interest to that the dev teams know the domain that they are working on. Also, designing great architecture cannot happen without the dev teams being familiar with the domain, right? But what if they don't really care? So what if they just care about the tasks coming one after another, and they don't really care about the domain? I wanted to mention here some techniques I'm using in order to encourage this curiosity. And it's not just about dev teams' curiosity, because we already heard I think it was also in Paul's presentation today, that we also learned about, or he also mentioned that it's not about dev teams' curiosity, but also the business should be curious about the other side, right? So everyone should be curious about the whole domain and how to work together and develop that shared understanding. So I usually use domain quiz for assessing the dev team's current domain knowledge. And I'm doing that. It is just a short survey. It's just not more than 12 or 15 questions, like not being more than 20 minutes, and assessing how the dev teams know the domain currently and where to improve. So the goal there, I guess we are distributing these presentations afterwards, and you will find some links there to try it out. So the very important thing there is to emphasize the goal, because it's not an exam. So you need to emphasize to the dev teams that you are doing that because you want to make sure where to improve the domain knowledge. Or you, as product people or domain experts or whoever, can assess the team's domain knowledge. And you want to learn from that. And you want to build up your domain knowledge improvement sessions based on what you've learned about the weakest areas, for instance. So the main goal here is identifying the weakest areas within the dev team's domain knowledge. Also, you can do that with more dev teams at the same time, so like cross-bounded context domain quiz. You will find some more details in my blog post regarding that. Yeah, make it fun, add a prize. One thing, though, is that it cannot be anonymous anymore if you add the prize and make it a competition, but everyone likes competing, so I think that's fun, and it worked out for me well when I associated the prize for the whole domain quiz as well. Yeah, and probably the most important thing here, because if you just do the domain quiz and you assess the team domain knowledge, and that's all, that doesn't help you. But you need to meet the team afterwards. So you need to sit down with the team and talk through all the answers and why those are the answers, the right answers, and look at the aggregated results, obviously not the individual results of the people, but look at the aggregated results and draw the conclusion together with the team and talk it through. And it's already a learning session, right? And obviously identify the weakest areas of the team's domain knowledge and identify where to improve. And if you identified where to improve, this is the best way, I think, to improve team's domain knowledge, or cross teams, so or more teams' domain knowledge. This is I call it domain flow simulation. It's basically a 1 or 2 day long workshop where we are stepping into customer shoes and we are really role-playing the whole model, the whole domain, sorry. Basically, it's not that hard. For instance, if you work for a company where producing, like for Facebook, Trello, or whatever, where the domain is very lightweight or easy. I mean, not the systems, but the understanding the domain flow and how the customers are using our product. But for instance, I worked for a company where we worked for investment banks, and we did the domain flow simulation for, issuing shares or bonds. So, like, it's a massive domain. There were people, there were more teams, more development teams I wanted to learn about the domain. And we basically role-played the whole thing. So we had investment banks, different investment banks in the room, development teams. We had the company who is going to issue the shares. And we did the whole workflow. So, like, the investment banks are pricing the shares. It's a massive workflow, and these kind of things, and it's a very, very good opportunity to learn. However, it requires lots of preparation. So imagine I had like 20 pages of the script itself, so how to run the whole thing, but I just needed to put it together once, and then I could reuse. So that's a great way to learn about customers, about how the domain works, by stepping into their shoes, into customer shoes, and role-play the whole thing, actually. And role-playing, like really role-playing, so when the telephone rings, when whatever, so everything should be role-played, and then that's a great technique. Yeah, the correct room setup is very, very important and crucial in this case, and also to leave enough time for breaks, because it's very tiring, especially this format of the learning about the domain. So leave enough breaks, because otherwise it wouldn't be that successful, I think. Yeah, people really liked it. I don't want to read out this feedback. I just wanted to bring it to you, like, to show everyone learned a lot about that. And also, they really like that format of learning about the domain. And the last thing I wanted to mention is dog fooding, which can be, again, it's domain dependent, because it can be obvious how to use your own product for your own purposes on a daily basis or on a regular basis if you work on a product like Trello or Facebook or whatever. But if you, let me just go back to the example, like the investment banking domain and the example. If you work with that product, it's very, very hard to find a purpose for using your own product for your own purposes. A purpose that is not artificial, that's very, very hard to find, but it's not impossible. So let's just brainstorm with the team together again. I know that I'm always saying that, but I really like this brainstorming with the dev teams about basically anything. Let's just find a non-artificial goal or purpose of using our own products for our own purposes, but revise on a regular basis whether it still makes sense. Because if I finally found a goal, but later on the dev teams are not using the product, actually it doesn't make sense anymore. So revise whether it makes sense. If not, then how we could change, and then using the product forward. And also, you can associate price or game to it, because it's, again, gamification makes it maybe easier. So it just needs to be brainstormed how to use that. Believe me, if you are working on a domain that seems to be very hard to, or a product that seems to be very hard to use on a daily basis for your own purpose, it's not impossible. So you need to brainstorm on it, the purpose. I just really wanted to give you a toolbox here, or a tool belt, how Paul called it today. So it is just about extending that tool belt and giving you just some tips and hints what product person can use in DDD, or how a product person can work together with the dev teams in domain-driven design world, and use what's useful from it, or find me for conversations afterwards. I'm very happy to have these conversations about these things. And you shouldn't forget this, that you can always lead by example. So if you are curious, if you are leading these sessions, or facilitating, or organizing, or you are the domain expert there, so believe me that people will follow that mindset, and that's great. And I think this is the most important thing, at least for me. So I really like to feel that I have a word there, and we can brainstorm it out together, and I really can, if not influence, but have an insight into architectural decisions and how the architecture of my product basically evolving. That's it. Thank you. I'm in time. Thanks.